Okay, 7 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. All right. Yes, let's do this. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the second day of the program. I'm Margaret Cheung from the University of Houston and the Center for Theoretical Biological Physics at Rice University. On behalf of the organizers and PoLS community, I welcome you to our virtual workshop. Before I hand the microphone to our moderator, Jonathan Pickett, I'd like to go over a few ground rules for this virtual workshop. This meeting is being recorded and will be released to the public after the meeting. And the presentation is pre-recorded talks followed by live Q&A. Please type in your questions in chat. Moderators will field questions. Following the spirit of PoLS meetings, questions from the students will be fielded first. At noontime, there will be roundtable discussions. A congregate, you will need to use Chrome to participate for maximum 50 people. There are 5 parallel tables moderated by PoLS students. In the afternoon, there will be a live discussions and panel sessions. Please use Slack to continue discussions asynchronously. So I thank everyone, and now I bring the mic to Jonathan.
Thank you. So my name is Jonathan Pickett. I'm a first-year graduate student in the Chemical, Physical, and Structural Biology program at Baylor College of Medicine. I'm the moderator for this morning's session. Again, just a quick reminder, during the questions and answer portions, we want to encourage student participation, is what I've been told. So to this end, student questions will be given priority. So the title for our first session today is Building Alliances with Minority Serving Institutions and HBCUs. And our first talk is entitled Opening the Untapped Pool of Talented STEM Students from Hispanic Serving Institutions, and specifically the Frontiers in Science program. And our presenter for this talk is Dr. Margaret Cheung. She is a Morris Professor of Physics at the University of Houston. She's interested in employing an integrative approach of quantum mechanical calculations, molecular simulations, and out of equilibrium statistical physics and network theory to investigate the role of emergent higher order protein assemblies in regulating living matter. She graduated from the National Taiwan University with a bachelor's degree in chemistry and received her PhD in physics from the University of California, San Diego. She carried out theoretical biological physics and bioinformatics research as a Sloan postdoctoral fellow at the University of Maryland and started her lab at the University of Houston in 2006. She's a fellow of the American Physical Society and vice chair of the Division of Biological Physics Unit from the American Physics Society, and a senior scientist / outreach director at the Center for Theoretical Biophysics and an adjunct professor about bioengineering at Rice University. In her role as outreach director, she's helped to inform, recruit, and mentor many undergraduate students, such as myself, as well as many others who come from underrepresented populations. So let's now hear from Dr. Cheung.
I'm Margaret Cheung. I'm a physics faculty at the University of Houston. I call UH. UH is a Hispanic serving institution and is the second most ethnically diverse research universities in the US. I'm also a senior scientist and an outreach director at the Center for Theoretical Biological Physics at Rice University. CTBP is one of the Physics Frontier Centers funded by the National Science Foundation. CTBP has a strong record in opening an untapped pool of talented science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or STEM students by being a partner with minority serving institutions. Today, I will share my experience with you about how we achieve this. First of all, I have to show you that where we are. We're in Houston, in Texas. Houston is a diverse city. However, it has a segregated neighborhood, which is a legacy from a couple decades ago. And if you take a look at the overall geography of Houston, here you can see that this is University of Houston on your right. And there's a Texas Southern University is also a minority serving institute. In fact, is a HBCU, historically Black college and university. And here in the shaded area is the Greater Third Ward. So this is the part where most Blacks lived during a century ago. And here is the park called Emancipation Park. Is the only park that the Blacks are able to visit during the segregated time. And the community is separated by highways. So here you see there's a highway 288. And on the west of 288, that will be where the Rice University will be, and also the world-renowned Texas Medical Center, and also the museums and all these very well maintained neighborhood. So with this segregated neighborhood, the students are usually in a very segregated school districts as well. So that impacted their education in public school, and that impacted their decision to go to college. And as a result, most of the people of color or Black students, they pursue higher educations where that will be in the east side of Houston. So my program, I'm here, University of Houston, is to bring students from the east of the Highway 288 to the west of Highway 288, or Rice University, where CTPP is. So here I give you a summary about how we grow equity, inclusion, and diversity in physics. First of all, I will show you how we remove systematic biases in the application process. And we will actively reach out to students at UH, community college, and Texas Southern University. And most importantly, that we provide a paid internship to these students. Most of them are first in their family to attend college. And we also provide individualized mentorship to these trainees. And after the summer, we realize that they will also need additional mentoring to continue during academic year. Therefore, we select a few highly motivated students to continue as research interns from our 39 weeks of retention programs that covers the fall and the spring semesters. That will help them to continue to finish the project. We also have formal evaluation procedures, and we integrate these students with other undergraduate students as CTPP. And here, during our new cycles of our funded centers, we now have a new emphasis on integrating or recruiting students from Texas Southern University. Here I show you the cohort from the last 2 years. We come from a very diverse pool of students. Since 2013, we have 53 fellows, 16 women, 22 Hispanics, and 5 African Americans. The students who retained them are co-authors in 10 publications, and 15 of them admitted to graduate schools in STEM. And we will have some data available if you are interested in knowing at the live Q&A session. So first, introduce what is a Frontiers in Science program. Mostly is the CTPP partner with 2 Hispanic serving institutions. One is University of Houston that have more than 45,000 students, and Houston Community College, more than 60,000 enrollment since 2013. And now we partner with TSU that has more than 10,000 students. We actively reach out to historically underrepresented students by giving in-person seminars at their universities and host live Q&A. And we collaborate with faculty at HCC or UH to organize FIS seminars. These seminars are like information sessions that allow students to ask questions, and some of them who are interested in a science career They may want to know more about our research program. So we also invited students from HEC and UH year-round to come to CTPP and experience an inclusive and welcoming environment. Here you see, this is one of their visits. This is our co-director, Jose Onochik, and one of the visits that the students coming in and see what's inside of a research facility. And one of our most important assets are mentors. Mentors are CTPP trainees. They are postdocs and graduate students. So we empower them to be empathetic mentors who are willing to take a risk in choosing their mentees, meaning that they are going to take a risk to mentor somebody who doesn't look like them or who doesn't come from the same background. So how we do that? We remove systematic biases in the application process by relying on students' personal statements and reviewing the courses that they took. What are the math courses they took, the computer programming course they took, but we do not require recommendation letters or grades because these two measures sometimes will include implicit biases. We train these mentors, review applications, and we interview students on the shortlist and gave mentors an opportunities to engage with mentees and have them select their mentees. Therefore, mentors will start to build their own decisions in deciding who do they want to work with. Because mentors know mentees from the beginning by reviewing their applications and talking to them. And once they selected their mentees, they know what mentees need to improve in order to build a very productive research experience in the summer. So before this summer program begins, the mentors will develop individualized mentoring plan for their mentees and prepare them for the summer research. For example, if some students are weak in thermal physics, then the mentors will want them to review a few chapters. If some students are a little bit rusty on the programming aspect, then the mentees can take a few online courses to prepare them, enhance their programming skills, and so on. Here I'm going to show you an example why this recruiting process works, why recommendation letters or grades does not necessarily reflect mentees' ability in research. For example, Rodney, he's a physics major. He wanted to become a physics professor, but he had to work 2 jobs. And in his statement, he said, "Physics does not come naturally to me, and having 2 jobs has not made it any easier." We recruited them, we worked with them, and Rodney has been showing now one of the most outstanding researchers from the cohort of the FIS. And here is how we decide how much we pay them. We pay them $5,000 for 10 weeks. That is about $15 per hour. We compare this hourly rate with the retail prices because most students, they have to take additional job outside of campus in order to make ends meet. $15 per hour is equivalent to a student who work as a Geek Squad at Best Buy. Most students with some programming skills can get a very good summer jobs or hourly wages. We have to provide some competitive wages for them to consider to work with us. After the summer, then, well, they still need these financial aids. We will help them apply resources at their schools, such as work studies. Most faculties can help post the positions, and students can apply for a grant as a work studies. Or they can get some tuition waivers by being a research assistant. We further help them to retain in science by integrating research activities at home institutions. For example, all of our research conducted at the CTBP in the summer, the poster will be used again at the UH Undergraduate Research Day. And this is one of our former mentees are having an interview and trying to advertise to students that how great the FIS program have helped them to engage with research and learn more skills outside of a classroom. The students, we leverage CTBP mentors and undergraduate advisors to track students' achievement for program assessment. So we form a network of FIS alumni so they can help one another. We also conduct evaluation assessments and then give it to students, mentees before and after the program so we can improve our programs every year. Here I'm going to show you some of the activities that work for the FIS program. We provide training and we provide individualized mentoring. Here you see Heiko, one of the CTBP postdoc, gave a seminars at HCC. So basically he delivered 15 minutes of presentation of why his research is important, and also another 15 minutes trying to tell the students what type of courses or skills they will need before they could apply to the research program. This helps students to understand what do they need to prepare in an application. And here is Vinny. Vinny also gave an FIS seminar at UH. So Vinny, after presenting his research and communicating with the students are more responsive to near peers, meaning that their mentors closer to their age. So when they ask Q&A questions, they can ask more in-depth and personal questions about how to be a researcher at the CTBP. And on the bottom, what you see is Brooklyn. Brooklyn just won the Best Poster Award. So at the end of the 10 weeks, all CTBPs, including faculties, postdoc, and graduate students, attend this wonderful event. And then we vote for the Best Poster Award. And here is a $25 gift card, and Brooklyn is very happy. And this is his mentor, Cheung. And during the summer research program, we also offer them professional development opportunities in terms of lunch meetings, 1 hour lunch meetings. In that hour, we give students some information, such as how to apply to a graduate school, how to look for a graduate school, and how to write a abstract, how to read papers, how to present a poster. Here's Dr. Bay from the Center of Communication at Rice Universities, and she's giving a 1 hour lecture showing students how to present a poster, prepare a poster. The FIS students is fully immersed with the Rice undergraduate researchers. They have a joint research seminars. They both have attended the undergraduate research day and compete for posters. What's different is that for Rice students, they are paid by Rice, and they paid by individual groups, or they sign up the course. These are the type of options that is available to Rice students, but for UH students, they usually don't have that. FIS offer this opportunity for them so they can receive a paid internship. And we also retain highly motivated students so they can complete their manuscript in the next 9 months. So here is an example about what type of project they will work on. Because each mentors know their mentees, so they tailored their project the students can achieve in 10 weeks. And after 10 weeks, then the students can extend their projects, also being paid about 10 hours per week to continue their projects. For example, Michaela's mentee, Ara, who is a student from computer science, and he set up a web-based machine learning tool to predict genome architecture. Michele now is a faculty at Northeastern University. And Lena, she was a CTPP postdoc, and she trained Hein Vo to develop a statistical model of a green fluorescence protein. Hein is the double major in physics and chemistry from UH, and now she is a graduate school at the University of Chicago. And Ming Yan is a faculty now in Taiwan, and his mentee Sarong has transferred to a professional school at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And there's many examples here that the mentor and mentees, they have built very strong work relationship and then help them achieve their goals. And for the students who retained for the 39 weeks, then they will have time to develop their projects into papers. So here I show a few mentees. That Anna Madik, she is a bioengineering student, and she stayed with CTPP for about 2 years, and she published a paper, 2 papers actually, with his mentor Ryan Haynes, and she's now a data scientist at the Houston area. So even though some students didn't go to graduate school, they secured a very rewarding career in Houston. And also Lucas is my graduate students, undergraduate students. He worked with Andre, my graduate students, and work on a project, and that delivered into a manuscript. And we collect feedback from the mentors as well, in addition to mentees. And here Vinny said, mentoring in the summer was a very good experience that will help me in my training to be a professor one day. And also a former mentor, Bing Jiang, he's now a faculty at MIT, and he said, I certainly benefited significantly from such a wonderful experience. First of all, we did learn something interesting scientifically. Second, this experience taught me how to communicate with someone who does not necessarily share the same scientific background, and how to convey and simplify complex concepts. Finally, I learned to be more patient through this collaboration with Saul. Saul, his mentee, is now a graduate student in bioinformatics at UH. This experience will definitely help me to become a better scientist. So why FIS works? We also conduct a survey, and we concluded that it is because this experience helps students improve their self-confidence. So we asked the students questions before they attended the summer program and after the summer program. And indeed, there's a significant strong evidence that this outreach effort has been successful in improving their intent to pursue graduate studies, which is our primary goal of the FIS outreach program. And we wanted to know why. It turns out that it related less about who they were with or what the project will be. Is the fact the entire immersed experience helped them improve their self-confidence. They can see themselves belong in the science community. So in the next cycle, we will apply rigorous assessment and evaluation and replicate this FIS experience at other institutions, such as Northeastern. Here is my summary. CTPP remains committed to growing the physics of living systems ecosystem with equity, inclusion, and diversity. Through the Frontiers in Science program, which is the program for undergraduate research during the summer, and for retention program as well. And CTPP and RISE is also the Node University for the Physics of Living System Student Research Network. And now we are also part of the Physics of Living System Physics Teacher Network that is hosted by Harvard University. I think by integrating these networks, by making them more inclusive, more equitable, we definitely can build a more diverse workforce in the future. Thank you very much. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to let me know.
All right. Excellent talk, Dr. Cheung. So while we wait for questions to roll in, and again, we want to emphasize questions from students. I had a question to kick things off, I guess. So I know that your outreach in particular, Dr. Cheung, is very focused on UH and HCC, and that we've seen a lot of success in those schools in getting students involved. And we've also seen efforts to bring in schools like Lone Star and TSU. I'm curious if we've had any students from those schools and what kind of struggles it's kind of involved in getting into those schools.
Yeah, I think that, of course, I say a lot of the success stories. There's also not very successful stories. And we conducted exit interviews of saying why some students drop off. I think that there's many reasons, mostly like personal reasons. And then I think that some of them, once they attended and thought, no, I'm not really interested in this, and hardly see themselves finishing the 10 weeks program, I think it's a good outcome too. Once they realize that this is not for them, that will help them, reshape their career goals. I think that is also a good outcome. So even as a not so successful story, I think this is a good outcome for them. Thank you.
Certainly. And then, okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat here. First from Kaustubh Hua. And they said, thank you, Dr. Cheung. Can you comment on how you train graduate students and postdocs to be effective mentors for programs such as FIS?
I think this is the secret sauce. I think the secret sauce is that, as a lot of the speakers yesterday mentioning that what motivates women or motivate people is really they want to do good for the society. So when the students, they are working on research, sometimes they feel like they're isolated from the environment and didn't see that there's a connections in the community. And once they realize that physics is one of the gatekeepers to prevent some underprivileged students to be successful, and they will basically be very motivated to help. So I basically just communicate with them saying that what they're doing is simply a life-changing event for a lot of the students. I think, Jonathan, you can attest to that. Because they're very highly motivated, and perhaps that during their entire background, they have not had a chance meeting a scientist or knowing that science is an option. So I think once the mentors realize the important role they play on another person's life, they take this opportunity very, very seriously. And I'm so proud of them. Thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate that, me personally, I don't come from like a minority background, but as a first generation university graduate and someone from a very poor rural area, I didn't know anyone that was really in a quote unquote success story, or especially from academia growing up. So having the chance to, especially considering the long winding route that it took me to get through university, and the different careers that I kind of got sidebarred on along the way, having the opportunity to be involved in a research program like this with a mentor like Vinny, who was able to really connect the two of us. And then like both him and also Ryan, Dr. Cheung, and then Mikhail as well. Really all of the mentors, like you have a direct mentor, but really all the mentors are there to help. And they were all willing to give their time and help each of us mentees at any opportunity they had. So in my personal experience, it was absolutely invaluable. Okay, so next question from Arvind. What was the best way to get the word out about this program? Were there open houses for applicants to know more about the program?
So the previous cycle, we are just focusing on HCC and UH, because we have to balance about how to use our time more effectively and save the time to really filter out the applications, because it takes a lot of time to review the application when you not going to consider GPAs as a cutoff, because we do have to read every individual personalized statement, and that takes a lot of time. So one of the, I think the challenge for FIS is the challenge to scale it up, how to make it into, to get 10 or 50 students. But I think that with the discussion with the center director, Jose Unochik, I think the best way to replicate is to replicate at institution level. So instead of having us to extend our mentee from 10 to 20 people, we will just double FIS at a different institution. So they can utilize their own students, graduate students, and postdoc to mentor the students, other than stretching our own mentor and mentees' time, to distract them from doing a good job.
Great, yeah. So next question is from Dr. Simon Sponberg. It says, nice to learn more about this great program. The program seems to rely on a close interaction between Rice and UH. Did this develop from an existing interaction between the faculty administration, or did it require de novo efforts at the organizational scale?
This is an excellent question, and I really have to credit for Jose's brilliance in looking at this connection when he moved the center from UCSD to Houston, because he immediately realized that the coalition between Rice and UH will be a much stronger one, because UH is also a research-intensive university. So I think that recruiting the PIs from the HSI, not just putting them as an outreach effort, but actively including the PIs from minority institutes as one of the major players in the center in science per se, is very, very important. Because there's a lot of effort, we'll say, okay, it's time to individualize the role of the outreach director. And it's needed, I understand that, because it's time consuming. But on the other hand, when this outreach director is also a research intensive PI, then they will know how to communicate and recruit the mentors more effectively.
Great, yeah. So next question is from Dr. Tim Bilash. Is there a role from making academic studies more modular than all or nothing commitment, essentially creating a spreadsheet of subjects one demonstrates over time so that it becomes more asynchronous to fit lifestyles?
I think that the word is flexibility. Absolutely, we need flexibility, because not everyone's lifestyle fits into 9 to 5. Particularly, a lot of our mentees have obligations to take care of their younger siblings or take care of their parents. This is why they're in Houston. A lot of them decided to pursue higher education in Houston other than UT Austin for a lot of the family reasons. So being flexible is very, very important.
Definitely. Okay, so Tavera Hawkins has the next question. So this works well with R1 institutions, but how can teaching institutions support or mirror these efforts?
I think I got these questions a lot, because it seems like that you need to have vast resources like Rice University to make that happen. And I wanted to encourage everyone, this is not just Rice or UH. This program is really the outcome of a synergy between the two. It cannot be done by Rice only. It cannot be done by UH only, really. If you take a look at how much effort is being done to put into account, if without HCC, this process will not going to work out. Jeff is going to talk to you about how to actually help us to go through with the applications from the students who took classes in HCC is a more challenging task, because students at HCC, they may take a few semester classes and work and come back. It's hard to track them. So in this regard, I really encourage all of the institutions, whether you're R1 or teaching institutes, find partners and build it together, and then you can grow something better on top of them, because the task to reach out cannot be done by either one or the other. It has to be done by everybody.
Just a word to Margaret here. As a director, the simple thing is bring the right people together and stay out of their way, and you have a great program. So that's what we did, and empower the people to do it. And that's put the resource and the things in place. And you're going to hear from the HCC. You heard from Margaret. You heard from the students. But that's what happens. You heard from lots of praise from my postdocs and students. And so you see that base. That's what takes. And I think our institutions have the people like that. The young people will be glad to do it, and some of the other faculty join it.
Great insight, definitely. Well, we're on the back of the 5-minute break here, but I want to get this last question in because I think it's a really good one from Celestina. Do you consider extending this program to Title I high school students in the future?
I think this is an excellent question, Celestina. And then during the post-T discussions, there's also teachers saying that, is there any opportunity for the teachers to participate research in these R1 schools? I think this is one perhaps an actionable items we can discuss in town hall. Definitely it will require resources because teachers obviously cannot work for free, and teachers are usually more expensive. So we definitely need resources such as NSF or private partnership in order to fund this at a greater scale. No problem.
But the answer is yes. The goal is to move in that direction, right, Margaret? There are a few things we'll be able to raise, but we haven't solved all the problems, but the answer is yes.
Yeah, it will take a much larger cohort of resources to make that happen. You can see this. Because we wanted the high school teachers to also bring their students to loop it in, you know, so for some of the students, they can be immersed in research, you know, before they go to college.
So our next talk is entitled Small Steps Towards Diversity and Inclusion in Soft Matter Physics. And our speaker, Dr. Marta McNeese, is a professor at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. McNeese enjoys teaching physics at all undergraduate levels and astronomy for non-science majors. She strives to make physics concepts accessible to non-majors and to develop the self-efficacy of physics majors. Her research background is in laser interactions with biomaterials. So let's now hear from Dr. McNeese.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be talking to you today about small steps towards diversity and inclusion in soft matter physics. My name is Marta McNeese, and I am from the Department of Physics at Spelman College. So recently, there was a White House executive order related to diversity and inclusion training, which did make me question, is this something we still want to do or are able to do? And I was happy to see that at least we are wanting to foster environments devoid of hostility, and training employees to create an inclusive workplace is still appropriate and beneficial. However, is a hostile, toxic workplace, is it enough to just make it devoid of hostile, toxic activity? And so I wanted to see what were some of the characteristics of such a place so that we could see what we needed to avoid in our departments and programs. So situations where colleagues are bullied or experiencing microaggressions, feeling devalued, these are things we want to erase from our departments and programs, but is that enough? In which case I went to the American Physical Society statement on promoting an inclusive workplace, and this is something that's been in effect since 1988 and revised in 2018. We call upon all of the members of the society to ensure persons of different races, genders, ethnic origins are feeling welcome in the physics community. So we want to go beyond making our community non-hostile, but moving to welcoming. And some characteristics of such a workplace would include one where colleagues feel understood, they feel embraced, there's sensitivity and communication, and people from different backgrounds, again, are valued. So that's really where we want to move this to. Now, does the physics community have diversity? Of course it does, but we certainly can do better. So I went to the American Institute of Physics and I looked at their team-up report, which if you haven't had a chance to look at, I would strongly recommend that you do so. And two graphs on the webpage that they show are the one on the left, which looks at bachelor's degrees which are earned in physics since 1955. If we look at the most recent 20 years, we see a steady increase, which has done a bit beyond doubling of these degrees. But then on the right, when we look at the proportion going to African Americans and Hispanic Americans, we see that there's also been that same increase over that time period within the Hispanic American community, but it's not reaching the proportion within the population. If we look at bachelor's degrees in physics going to African Americans, we see a bleaker picture where there is no increase, and almost could say that there has been a slight decrease for that same time period. And we are certainly not approaching the proportion of African Americans within the population. So we are missing out on young people in our communities, involving them within physics. So how can we improve this? Again, if you look at the team-up report, and I am not at all affiliated with that team, but it is a team of physicists, astronomers, and social scientists. And what they did was look at data, including interviewing African American students, and talk to them about their experiences in physics and astronomy. And they have some recommendations for systemic changes which would improve the representation within physics and astronomy. And again, I would recommend that you take a look, but I'm going to talk about some things that we can do, if not making systemic changes, but making small steps to get us on the right path. So just a bit about physics at Spelman College. You're looking at a photograph from our senior luncheon. I believe this was 2016, and you can see that we are a fairly diverse group. And actually within this group, there were 4 students, 3 are pictured, but we come from different countries. We are from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And so we might not match up with the typical picture of a physics department. But STEM at Spelman is something we're very proud of. About a third of students pursue majors in STEM fields, including engineering, which is actually a dual degree program where our students spend 3 years at Spelman and then go on to an engineering school for 2 years. And about a quarter of our graduating seniors do get their degrees in STEM fields. We've also been recognized by the NSF as producing very highly undergraduates that go on to get PhDs in STEM disciplines. So we're very proud of what we have done with STEM within our students. And again, we are a small department. There are 5 full-time faculty, 1 lab coordinator, and our physics students are typically going to be those taking the introductory physics for the life sciences course or pre-med students. We have a good portion, about 40 to 50 students a semester, that are taking the calculus-based sequence. So these would be our physics, chemistry, dual degree, and math majors. But then when you look at our upper level physics courses, we typically only have 2 to 6 students in those courses. However, keeping in mind that Spelman is a women's college and is also an HBCU, we are still among the top producers of Black women physics bachelor's degrees, and even a top producer of just physics bachelor's degrees among African American students. So if you are wanting to make your programs more diverse and find students of diverse backgrounds, I would urge you to take a look at some of the physics degree granting HBCUs and see if you can build collaborations there. So there are about 23 of them, 4 of which actually do have doctoral programs. So those are the ones that are starred: Alabama A&M, Florida A&M, Hampton, and Howard. But again, reaching out to these colleges and universities would be a good place to start for diversifying the field of physics in living systems. And I would suggest that, again, reaching out to HBCUs, establishing collaborations with faculty and students is the way to begin. Also, getting students into your summer research programs, and perhaps when they return to their university during the academic year, if there are collaborations established with faculty there, they can continue their research at their home institution where there may be some coordination in terms of research topics between the two institutions. I would also suggest you consider looking at the APS Bridge program, which has been successful at bringing students from HBCUs and other minority serving institutions into R01 programs where they will complete a master's and possibly continue on there with their PhD program. So what are some ways that we can build these collaborations and make them fruitful ones that can persist over time? And again, keeping this idea that we want to move from non-hostile programs and collaborations to ones that are welcoming. So one thing I would like to say is that it can't just be on the HBCU faculty. And I'm sure that you would agree with me when I say relationships are going to be crucial for collaborations, but these need to be relationships where there is give and take from both directions. So for example, I will on occasion get an email. We have a program, whether it's a summer program or a graduate program, and we would like some of your students to come and join us. And that's perfectly fine. I'm happy to pass that email along, but I don't know if that's the most fruitful way to have these relationships. I think that if you can reach out and establish things together at the beginning, they're going to be better than getting emails where people are putting in for a proposal and they want someone from Spelman to sign a letter of support, which they've already pre-written, and then they just want you to recruit students. That may not be the best approach. I think faculty to faculty communication is important because at Spelman and other HBCUs, we certainly want to see our students succeed and we want them to be supported once they leave this very nurturing environment of an HBCU. And so it helps to know who is the person of contact at the R01 university, who can be that pillar of support should the student have any difficulties. And we don't know that if we don't have much communication between the two institutions. I would also suggest that whenever barriers can be removed, we should try to do so. So in thinking about what possible barriers might there be for students from HBCUs, and again, I'm speaking with my experience at Spelman. I'm not trying to generalize to all HBCUs or all college students, but some experiences that I find to be common amongst our students are financial concerns. That can be a barrier. So about 50% of Spelman students are Pell Grant eligible. They do have a financial need. Many of them will graduate from their undergraduate department with a good portion of debt. And as we are seeing, the lending practices tend to disfavor students in the African American community. So they may not have the best loans in terms of needing to pay them back immediately versus delaying them. Another thing to consider is family responsibilities. I've had students who are needing to take care of sick family members or elderly family members. In one particular case, a student would need to leave campus on a weekly basis to take her family member to a medical treatment. And she would have to leave the state actually to do this. So are your programs able to support students who may have some of these additional concerns? I would also suggest that if you can build some seawalls, that would be helpful if it is necessary. So you might have a very positive and engaging faculty, but you might have one colleague who might not be the best person to work with younger undergraduate students. And in some cases, you might even describe a colleague as being toxic. So if that is the case, can you perhaps not involve that colleague with the younger students? I have experienced students who have really had difficulties in transitioning to a different institution. And in one case, a student left science altogether after she received her master's degree. And she's doing fine. She's very successful in law. But at the same time, I wonder if she had been in a more supportive environment, where would she be? Would she still be directly involved in STEM? I should also mention that some of these ideas of personal support, that is factor 4 in the Team Up report. Students will be able to persist and succeed when those personal supports are in place. So even though we may not be able to make structural changes, one person can still make a difference and make a program more welcoming. And so some very simple things that I would suggest are listening. Clearly, where we are right now, people don't necessarily want to listen to each other, especially when they disagree. And if there are challenges, if there are disagreements, we can't solve the problem until we can identify the problem, and we need to listen to each other in order to identify it. I would also say, get comfortable with your discomfort. We've seen a lot of things going on in our country in the past few months, and it can be uncomfortable for some. We've needed to have some discussions around race and diversity, and for some that might be uncomfortable. But at the same time, if we are to make progress, if we are to solve problems, we might need to just sit in that discomfort, hear what's going on, and be able to solve some of these problems together. I would also like to say one person can always speak out. If there are some of these toxic things going on in your departments or programs, if there's some bullying, if there's some devaluing, if there are things that might chip away at people's confidence or ability to persist, then we might need to speak out in these situations. Another thing that is useful is to foster cohorts whenever possible. So if you're bringing in students from a college to your summer program, can you bring 2 or 3 instead of just bringing 1? I've heard from students, particularly those that go into our dual degree programs, once they get to the engineering school, they feel they can't break into study groups. They have to really prove themselves first before they're accepted by other students. And so that's a tough thing to have to deal with when you are new at a university or a department. And it also speaks to factor 1 from the Team Up report, which is belonging. If students feel they belong, if they feel that they are part of the physics community, that goes a long way to being accepted and persisting through challenges. I have to say that when I was an undergraduate student, I received an APS minority scholarship many years ago, and I really felt like I'm a part of the physics community. And even though it was a small amount of money, it was more the recognition that I belonged in the physics community, which meant something and which I still remember to this day. And finally, if we look at research interests, to look at physics of living systems, it's important to look at the interdisciplinary aspect. Many of our students are interested in biomedical applications when they begin the physics program at Spelman. They want to do things that are going to help the community and that are going to contribute to humanity in general. And I think emphasizing those interdisciplinary connections are a way to improve the enrollment in physics of living systems. Also, engineering is a very popular idea with newer students. If there are connections there, I would draw upon those to perhaps move people into physics of living systems, and also emphasizing computational physics. Our students want to get these computational skills. They see that they're important in a 21st century job environment. So wherever we can draw these interdisciplinary connections, I think we should, and that it will help in terms of increasing diversity in this field. So that's all that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for watching this, and I look forward to answering questions and having a conversation during the Q&A session. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Curtis at Georgia Tech and Dr. Cheung at Rice University, who invited me to participate and convinced me to do so, even though I was a bit concerned where I was not sure what I could add to this particular workshop. But thank you for your encouragement. And finally, some of the references that you might want to take a look at. The fourth one from the physics teacher is a recent article on anti-deficit framing. You want to take a look at that, as we want to look at students as not having deficits, but having room for growth. So thank you, and I will see you at the Q&A session.
Okay, great talk. Let's thank Dr. McNeese. So while we wait for some questions to roll in, I wanted to ask specifically about bridge programs and whether your institution has a specific program, or if you were talking about just kind of general bridge programs earlier in your talk.
I was speaking about the bridge programs in general, but in the past we had a brief collaboration with Morehouse College and sending students to UC San Diego. But
Nice.
This was not officially an APS funded program.
Okay, thank you. Looks like the first question is from Oleg. And can you comment on non-academic careers your physics majors go into?
So many of our students go into law school. We have many in R&D related to different industries, so biomedical devices, optical devices are some that they go into.
All right. Looks like, okay. So Sandra McGuire has the next question. And do you talk with these Spelman students about stereotype threats, microaggressions, imposter syndrome, etc.? These are things they may experience when they go to the PWIs.
So we do talk about those things informally in terms of what they might expect when they're going to a PWI, but I would say formally the physics department does not do this, but there are some other funded programs. We have a RISE program and some additional programs which will do this in general with our STEM students.
All right. And just to clarify, PWIs is primarily white institutions, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question from student Caitlin Knapp. She asks, I think that particularly this year, because of COVID, graduate students across the country have been more vocal about needing that sense of recognition, community, and belonging. What steps do you think could be taken at the institutional level to address these needs?
So I think it's important that departments reach out to their students and try to see what the needs are and to build whatever kind of virtual community that they can build. I know, again, we're an undergraduate institution, but our students are really feeling that lack of community. So within our department, we are trying to at least reach out more frequently, have some virtual get-togethers, even if there are no official topics, but just really trying to reach out to each other. I think that's important in this time certainly given the isolation they may be feeling. And I should add, we are 100% remote this semester. We did not have any students return for residences to the dorms.
Yeah, it's a very challenging situation for sure. So a related question from Christian Anderson: has the pandemic and shift to online classes research made it more possible for students to fulfill outside obligations, paying off debts, taking care of family with health problems, etc.? Or does it make it harder because attention is split, access to equipment is limited, etc.?
I think it could be both. So for some students, they do have younger siblings that are at home, and while the parents might be working, they've needed to help that younger sibling deal with virtual school. So that's one possibility. Some find that they need to work more given the fact that, the parents may be having some financial issues due to the employment situation in the country. And then in other cases, some students are quite okay being at home, working from home. So it really is an individual situation for our students.
Excellent. So the next question is from Dr. Cheung. She asks, do you send students to conferences, and if so, which conferences do they attend?
We do. Our students will typically go to APS. Some will go to Abercams because some of them will have some biomedical types of projects. We have students going to the NSBP, so that's the National Society of Black Physicists. They will attend, and sometimes QWIP, also the Conference for Undergraduate Women in Physics as well.
All right. Sounds like a lot of good opportunities there.
And let me also add just that they will take their summer projects and present them. So external universities, they're there for the summer, and they will present those at the appropriate conferences. So possibly material science or astrophysics.
Very cool. So the next question is from Sarlene Dinos. Since many or most R01 universities are wanting to develop partnerships with HBCUs and other MSIs, is there a sustainable way that these universities and federal funding agencies can support and fund such collaborations so that they are not a burden for HBCU faculty?
I think that would be great if the funding is available through NSF, and it can be from the outset, something that's a collaboration, again, at the beginning, not something that's already in place at the R01, but something people can work together on so that the faculty at the HBCU can have some input and can get some research benefit as well. Because again, at least for a college like Spelman, the issue is more time. We have a teaching load of 3 courses each semester. We do not have graduate students, so it makes it difficult to spend, the majority of time on research. But if it's possible, faculty research during the academic year, that would be helpful.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And next question is from Dr. Tim Bilash. Do you have any resources to help those who have to gap their activities due to other obligations after study or outside of study?
So are we talking about academic resources? In that case, we do have students that are serving as tutors virtually. So someone similar to a learning assistant, I would guess, where they've already gone through the course and they're available to other students who are currently taking the course. We have other centers, particularly chemistry and math, to help students get through those barrier courses and into the STEM majors.
All right, that sounds like some excellent resources. I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, but we can definitely continue the conversation on the Slack feed. And then we're scheduled for a 15-minute break up to 10:25 my time, 11:25 Eastern time.
I have kind of just one more question here. How do have the students doing research during the summer? How do you integrate your students? They go outside, they do in-house, it's a combination of both. How do you work on the summer?
So it's a combination. Some will go to external REU programs. Some will work at Spelman with faculty who may have some funding externally, or there are some programs that will fund the student to stay and do research at Spelman. So it's a combination.
Do you see some room for improvement? There's always room for improvement. What would you like to see in sort of accelerating this process and helping not only the student, but also helping the faculty, right? I think has to base, as you heard from Margaret, my experience that synergy has to involve everybody. I don't think only one creates a synergistic interaction.
I think, well, speaking for myself and maybe a couple of my physics colleagues, one thing that would be helpful would be if there are graduate students who have a strong interest in working at a teaching institution, if they might want to postdoc in some way where they might teach, but also do research. But it would be a much heavier teaching load than you would expect from a typical postdoc. If that's a possibility, and working with the R01 perhaps on some funding mechanisms, perhaps the RUI, research at undergraduate institutions. So again, setting those collaborations where there can be some funding in place, I think that would be an improvement.
Could I ask you a question? How many majors do you have in physics?
Right now, we have about, I'd say, only 12.
My former postdoc is a professor in Denison. In fact, she's a chair. And from what I understood from her, they, in fact, provide summer scholarships. It's compulsory for all of them. It's a small physics major class each year. It's compulsory for them to do some research, but Denison provides funding for that. So they don't have to go seek something outside. What fraction of your students in your physics major want to do this research, and how many could be funded directly by Spelman? Or do you always need to seek outside funding?
The physics department, we are always seeking external funding. So again, there isn't the funding coming from the college. It's coming from grants programmatic grants that Spelman has gotten. So that would be the source of internal funding. It's not just some funds that Spelman has. It's always grant-based. Individually, faculty are also seeking these funds. So right now, we do not have those internally available funds just, at our discretion.
But is it compulsory for them that they have to do some kind of research, the graduating majors?
It is not compulsory in physics, no. I would say that most of them do. Probably 80 or 90% will have gone to an REU or done research with one of the faculty in their 4 years. But it is not actually a requirement.
Thanks.
So our next talk is entitled Harris County Community College Alliance, Bridge to Baccalaureate. And our speaker is Mr. Jeffrey Stear. He's an engineer and STEM program director at Houston Community College, where he is a co-PI for the Harris County Community College Alliance, or LSAMP, and LSTAMP grant from the National Science Foundation. He's a retired professional civil engineer and a retired major from the Air Force and Air National Guard. And he has been a secondary and post-secondary STEM educator for 8 years. Jeffrey is currently pursuing a doctorate in education at Abilene Christian University. So let's now hear from Mr. Stear.
My name is Jeff Stear. I'm the co-PI for the LSAMP grant at Houston Community College, and I'm here today with my colleague, Robin Nagy. Hello, Robin. So we want to just start by saying thank you to Dr. Margaret Cheung who is actually part of the alliance that we're going to be talking to you about here for a few minutes. We were invited to this presentation, this conference by Dr. Cheung to talk about our experiences with building an alliance to promote STEM education for historically underrepresented minorities in Harris County, Texas. The alliance is part of the LSAMP program for the National Science Foundation, which, for those of you who may not be aware of it, LSAMP stands for the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. At the NSF level, our alliance is really about the connection between Houston Community College and San Jacinto College. What we're going to be talking about today is principally what we did within HCC, but we'll also be talking about how that started and got its start through San Jacinto, and then kind of how we've shared some of that and it's grown with San Jacinto. The message that this is about on my side, and Robin will talk when I'm done, is about how building an alliance around shared values and vision with a dynamic team powered by consensus building leads to program success. So just a little bit more about LSAMP. LSAMP is about diversifying the nation's STEM workforce. The specific intent is to increase STEM degrees for historically underrepresented minorities. It relies heavily on the Tinto method, which even back in the 70s, they knew that there was a benefit to providing some social supports to academics. But at its heart, the goal of LSAMP is to provide innovative evidence-based recruitment and retention strategies and relevant educational experiences. So I am I'm in my third career now as an engineering educator, but I started my career as an engineer, and I practiced civil engineering for 35 years. And I also served 21 years in the Air Force Air National Guard. And through those two important parts of my life, I learned to take a very structured approach to things. So I felt like we needed to start. When I first got involved in this project, I had just started working at HCC, and I walked in the door with a lot of things to do. And I felt like the first thing we needed to do was understand what it was all about. What's the mission, right? In Air Force terms, I'd be talking about what's the mission. In engineering terms, I'd be saying, what's the problem, identifying the problem. And so it kind of became apparent that what it boiled down to is to say, if underrepresented minority students embrace social responsibility and STEM education embraces underrepresented students, then as a syllogism, as my wife would say, who's an attorney, can't we then deduce that STEM education should embrace social responsibility? And so obviously we felt like the answer was yes. So from that shared value and that shared vision became the construct for our approach to a social responsible andragogy to empower adult historically underrepresented minority students to have more input and say and voice and get involved and active in their own STEM education. And what that did for us is it simultaneously gave us as educators the opportunity to innovate our approach to STEM education to be more socially responsible as a path forward. So it really worked well, and I felt like I had my mission. So the next thing, going into a project like this is, at least I figured out from as along the way, was I needed more and bigger brains, right? So I knew I was going to need to put together a dynamic team. And the question that drove me was, how can we develop a new National Science Foundation college level grant program from scratch? We had to spend over $200,000 a year for 3 years. We had to recruit and keep at least 50 L1 STEM students, which are the students that are actually getting paid. And we wanted to be able to serve even more L2 students, which means students that may not qualify for the stipend, or that may not have time to commit to a whole stipend number of hours, and just other students that needed help, right? And we had to do all that. We had to meet our NSF grant requirements. Oh, and as I mentioned, we started 3 months behind, right? So the answer, of course, is go get some help. So, of course, I started with my boss. My boss is Dean John Vaselli of the Engineering Center of Excellence. Of course, he got me into the mess to begin with, right? But to his credit, he's an incredibly amazing guy. He's very resourceful, good to his word. And he's just an incredible pleasure to work with. But he connected me with the right resources with the HCC to start building the team that we needed. The first and most important person that he connected me to was, at the time, was Jordan Carswell, who was the program director for, at Houston Community College. We have the West Houston Institute, which is a program in actually a building and put together with the HCC Foundation. And their job is basically to do these kinds of innovations and to look for paths forward in secondary education, post-secondary education that hadn't necessarily been thought of yet. So this really actually felt right into their laps and worked out very well. Jordan and I talked. The first idea we came up with was a community of experience. And Robin's going to tell you guys all about the community of experience here in a few minutes when she shares her part. But the cool thing about that community of experience was we knew that we were going to need faculty. So we went out and we got together 4 faculty mentors, and Robin was one of those, to lead the teams of students that would be doing this community of experience. So that became, and the whole thing, and the whole idea of community came out of that too, right? Because in terms of being able to be socially responsible, in order to reach out to a community of students, historically underrepresented minorities, we felt like a community approach was very important. And we also had a lot of help from, again, San Jacinto College to inform us and say, hey, you know, our focus is on communities, and we need yours to be too. So all those things really work together well. So as we sat down and started brainstorming, and which is the next step of engineering, right? And the creative and the critical process and thinking, we came up with the idea for 2 more communities. We established a community of scholars, which was very similar to what Sanjak did. And our community of scholars was dedicated to advising, connecting students with institutional supports, because we found that and it was surprising to see how little they knew about it and how much they benefited from it. We also did a lot of STEM outreach projects, and I could talk for hours just about the STEM outreach. It was a lot of fun. We promoted student interactions. Of course, LSAMP is designed to address, to work with historically underrepresented minorities. And I just want to point out that 32% of the students that participated in our LSAMP program were Black or African American, 28% Hispanic and Latino. And then the male-female ratio, I think, is fantastic too. This is just really reassuring that almost, I mean, I wish it was exactly 50-50, or if not a little higher on the female side. But it is good to see that kind of balance. And I also just want to mention that as another success, the growth that we've had with our college partners that are the other LSAMP institutions around Houston, and the benefit of those connections for students to ultimately do what we're trying to do is get them into those 4-year programs. And that's been incredibly helpful too. And I like to just, the last thing, Robin and I talked about, and you can edit this out, Robin and I talked about just how cool it was to see even the difference between our presentation styles, right? And how we've managed to leverage and make the most through the collaborative effort, through the problem solving, to leverage that strength. So the next piece, I guess, as we pulled together the program and we put together our communities, I mentioned a community of experience, community of scholars. The third community I hadn't mentioned was community of research. The community of research, the purpose of that was to kind of maintain the connection that we had started at HCC with LSAMP and with some other grants. We had a lot of partnerships with University of Houston, Rice University, UTMB, and University of Houston downtown. And so we wanted to continue to have, that was part of our strategy and our stipends, was to get our students involved in summer internships and to get our partners in to do research seminars so that they could help recruit and inform students about what those internships would involve. So anyways, we moved along, we got everything going. We started in the spring of last year of 2019, and you all know what's getting ready to come up, right? I think as soon as I say spring of 2019, everybody knows where it's going to. And I guess I call this piece that I'm getting ready to talk about the consensus building, right? because consensus building, as we all know, is the best way to solve problems quickly that involve a lot of different parties. And boy, did we get a lot of that from COVID-19, right? That's the big story from the spring. So yeah, we had just started our community experience. We had 40 students that were involved in these face-to-face meetings every week. We had talked to them about all these wonderful experiences that we're going to have at the West Houston Institute with all this makerspace stuff that we had for them. And about as quick as we got started is about March 11th when the Houston rodeo came along and they shut the city of Houston down. So, you know, but the interesting part about this phase of the program in terms of consensus building is as we started to really understand what the students were facing in terms of unemployment and the resulting economic instability, the fact that they had to spend so much more of their time and get used to online learning, the unmet expectations and frustrations and fear of it all those things, really, we, from the lens of LSAMP, we started to say, you know, what can we do to help? Where can we fit in here from the socially responsible and combining those things and learning about how to teach STEM better? What can we do? What we actually did in the middle of March, after about halfway into the semester, we had only had 35 students that had signed up for the program. So we decided, and we knew from feedback from our students that there were a lot of students that were out of work. Students honestly had a little bit more time on their hands because a lot of them weren't working. So, and we also had a better opportunity to recruit because nobody had heard of what the heck we were talking about when we first recruited at the beginning of the semester. Now we had a group of students who could spread the word by mouth and go out and talk to their friends, and it turned out to be very successful. We actually got another almost 40 students, more students the second go round than we did the first go round. And so it was worked very well with what the NSF was about and trying to do too. So the consensus building really helped us do a lot of things better. I could talk for hours and hours about that too, but I'm just going to stop here and ask how we're doing on time. Robin, have you been keeping an eye on me? How am I doing? 10 minutes? Really? Not bad. All right, well, you can probably skim that down a bit. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to say, so that's really kind of from my perspective, how this thing went for us up this first year. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to ask Robin to jump in now. She's going to kind of tell you all about where we went from here. I just want to take this moment to acknowledge in this forum and in front of everybody how amazing Robin is, how helpful she has been, and just how proud I am to be part of this with her, with all my teammates. But Robin was principal because she was the one of the mentors from the community experience last year that became a coordinator over the summer, and now we work hand in hand every day and making this thing work better. So have at it, Robin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. It has been my pleasure to become involved in this LSAMP program. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about our curriculum, and I'm going to give you some examples of curriculum elements that we've incorporated. But before I do that, I want to talk about the lens that we viewed through when we made decisions about what curriculum to offer, what opportunities and resources to offer for our students. And so, of course, as Jeff has already mentioned, we are always keeping in mind innovative, evidence-based best practices to increase the retention of these students. But, you know, that's kind of a general phrase. It's something that we hear a lot. And so it's important to dive into really what is our perspective on that. There are a whole heap of options for things that you can do for your students that fall under this umbrella of innovative evidence-based best practices. So what specifically did we look at? We spent a lot of time thinking about our students, the demographics of our students at HCC, drawing on our own collective experiences with them in our own classes. And we also spent a lot of time over the summer talking directly with some of the all-star students from the spring. So we assembled an advisory board over the summer of students. We met with them every week for an hour, sometimes two, and just really dove into what they needed from their perspective, what worked and what didn't. And so coming into the fall, we really knew we wanted to focus on increasing students' sense of belonging, their self-efficacy and their confidence, providing them opportunities for really authentic engagement, establishing and strengthening these already established communities for these students, and also giving them some opportunities to build a growth mindset and resiliency. And we know that all of those things ultimately will have good returns for them in terms of retention and success in STEM fields. And so that was sort of the overarching theme that we looked at, and then we kind of dove into what specifically are we going to offer them to accomplish these goals. And so I'm going to walk through just a few examples today of some of the curriculum that we've implemented. This is just a taste of what we offer them. And it's part of a much bigger picture. Most of this stuff is offered through the community of scholars that Jeff mentioned, and then I'm also going to end talking about the community of experience. So one thing that we really grew a lot in terms of offerings in the fall are these opportunities for social connections between the students. So we haven't started it yet, but we're offering a book club, and I'm really excited to see which books the students pick and what they want to read. We are having some informal coffee chats just as sort of a counterpoint to the more formal research talks. Give them an opportunity to connect with each other and also connect with guest speakers. We've got a PhD student who's an LSAMP alum, some student leaders from STEM student organizations within HCC, and just kind of show them another level, another style of communicating more informally with people. We have established some discussion boards. These were the all-stars following COVID in the spring. The engagement in these discussion boards was just nuts in the spring. You can see they're talking about everything from NASA to how to do your taxes on here. And so we have a student who acts as a discussion board moderator, and these are all student-driven ideas. So they propose a discussion board, they put together the content for it, and then they manage all of the comments and the interactions that are coming in following their initial post. We are also offering them, some opportunities for metacognitive exercises. They don't know what metacognition means, and so we call them self-reflective assignments. Jeff likes to call it my hippie stuff. And so this is just one example. These are some questions we are going to ask them to reflect on at the end of the semester, ask them to maybe write an essay, record a video, build a website, somehow sort of reflect on their experience and put that out into the world. And to me, this is really important because all of our students are in intense programs of study. And I don't think many of them take the time to reflect in this way unless we really kind of give them the opportunity to do so. And we know that this metacognition can be really, really powerful for them. So it's important to me to provide that opportunity and get them thinking about that. The other thing that we're building a lot this semester is our collaborative learning groups. And this is kind of the evolution of just some peer tutoring that we started initiating in the spring. We just kind of connected them together. You guys are all in the same class. Here's some people who've already taken it and help each other out. We are formalizing that, taking it to the next level this semester. And so we surveyed the students and asked them, what classes are you in that you need help with? What classes have you completed successfully? And that allowed us to identify a handful so far of courses, and then individual students that could act as learning leaders in these collaborative learning groups. So the next step is to provide some support for those learning leaders that we've identified and give them some materials to help them build skills to actually be able to facilitate learning with these other students. And then we're just gonna put them all together and see what happens. We're gonna group them in Canvas. That's the learning management system that we use. So they'll be in a group there and they'll have tools like file sharing, live virtual meetings, discussion boards that they can utilize to connect and work together. And then the other really important element is that we're just going to kind of let it rip and see what happens. Obviously, we're going to monitor to make sure things are going successfully, but we really want it to be student-driven. We especially want these learning leaders to feel like they are able to apply and grow their skills, and that they are really taking ownership of the experience for the other students. So we're going to avoid micromanaging any of those collaborative learning groups. And then finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is our community of experience. So as Jeff mentioned, this LSAMP has three sort of branches of community of scholars, community of research, and then community of experience. And the goal with this was to provide students an opportunity to do some real project-based learning, creative problem solving, collaboration. And so we worked with Jordan Carswell at the West Houston Institute. He has developed this curriculum for his Ideas Academy that involves all of this, and we sort of, he's sharing that with us now for LSAM. And unfortunately, this curriculum is really rooted in being in the same place at the same time, in the makerspace at the West Houston Institute, you know, doing digital fabrication, sitting at a table, writing on big pieces of paper, and really just being present in that space. And so, of course, in 2020, the question for Jordan and I became, how do we preserve the dimensions of this experience that we want them to have in this completely virtual environment? And so we took a lot of time over the summer to think about how we could translate this experience successfully in the fall. And so I'm going to take just a minute or two and tell you what that looks like. We're giving them sort of a two-phase experience. They are, for the first portion, working on some self-paced mindset and skill set modules that we have created for them. So they're exploring their own creative identity. They are exploring how that identity intersects with digital technology. And then they're also learning about sort of global currents in terms of sustainability and resiliency and things like that. This is just meant to be a starting point for them to sort of really analyze their own identity and think about their skill sets and what they might contribute to collaborative projects, which is the second phase. In tandem with their own self-paced work in these modules, we also have live synchronous meetings with them. And we knew that we needed to model for them how you collaborate in a digital environment, and how you do some of this design thinking that we're going to ask of them. So we've been meeting with them once a week. We have been modeling design thinking. We have been using various digital tools. You can see some of them here on Flipgrid, which is a back and forth video chat app that we're using. You can see this video down here of them collaborating in Mural. They're all adding their own little sticky notes onto this brainstorming worksheet here. And so we're really just trying to show them some of the tools that, that we hope they're going to use on their own in the second phase of this program. So we're kind of in the midst of this right now, and coming up at the end of October, beginning of November, we are going to put them into smaller groups, into solution design cohorts. And so we are going to ask them to focus on the global goals, which are a set of goals produced by the UN for sustainable development. We're going to ask each group to tackle a goal and undergo some design thinking to come up with a solution, a suggestion, maybe a product, maybe a social media campaign, maybe a work of art, who knows, we're gonna see what they come up with. And that's how we kind of got back to that really truly collaborative, creative process that can't be housed in that same space anymore, but hopefully the spirit of it is being translated online. And so those are just some of the things that drove our curriculum this semester, the opportunities that we are offering for students. LSAMP is a constantly evolving experience. It is heavily influenced by the students and the feedback that we get from them, what they want from us in terms of opportunities and support. And as best we can tell, it's working well. And so we're actually going to leave you now with the words of some of our students as a way to close out.
At the end of this experience, when I saw my project, I was like, did I really do that? And I'm just a community college student, but that was even impressive for myself.
LSAP has made a tremendous difference in my educational experience. Everything from introducing me to people I never thought I'd be in the room with, to things that I never thought I'd get a chance to know about. It even helped usher me into getting into university and transferring to Texas Southern University's LSAP program.
All right. Excellent discussion. Let's thank Dr. Stear. And then to lead into the questioning here, or the questions, I myself was in the LSAMS program. I was a peer facilitator in the LSAMS program at UH, and I had an amazing experience in the program. I taught the Organic Chemistry 2 course in coordination with the faculty at UH. And like I said, it was an amazing opportunity, and there's so many, I feel like LSAM does a really good job of reaching out to and getting in contact with underrepresented minorities to a very high degree. But one thing I noticed both when I was in the LSAMS program and from the slide that you showed was that there's still a pretty large gap in the physical sciences in the sense that there are not very many people in the LSAMS program who are involved in the physical sciences. And having also come from a community college where that wasn't necessarily an option, I mean, not the LSAMS program, that is. I'm curious if you have any ideas for how to improve outreach and research opportunities at the community college level in the physical sciences.
Robin, you would take that one since you're a little closer to the physical sciences?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, and I would like to say that actually in the fall, I think we have a good handful of things from Nagy, and we had 0 in the spring. We're in the right direction. I think that we started out really rooted in engineering just by word of mouth. Of course, Jeff is in engineering, and so I think there were just kind of connections there that really seeded the program in engineering and just fed a lot of engineering students into it. But we're actively trying to recruit others other than engineers. Over the summer, we reached out to a lot of faculty, and we had a faculty partner in each at HCC, and we really reach out to their students on an individual basis and tried to kind of provide them information, get them in. So that was one avenue. We're also trying to include some less engineering types of tests, and in the book club I specifically picked because they're more natural sciencey focused. So I think we're at this phase, we're just trying to sort of make more connections broadly in the sciences at HCC, and it's really a word of mouth thing at this point. Okay. But yeah, it is something we're aware of. It was one of the first things we noticed about our demographics, and something we're actively trying to improve.
Excellent, excellent. Actually, I thought that the book club idea was a really good idea. I would have definitely enjoyed something like that myself.
That's good to hear. We rolled it out last week, and we've already got 20-something students signed up for it. So it's awesome. Been popular with the students too.
Very cool. So the next question, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Oh,
yes.
okay, so the next question was from Dr. Cheung. She asked, how do you decide which R01 research programs HCC mentees will go to in the summer?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the people that are willing to come, right? It starts with finding people who are interested and see the need and see the opportunity that community colleges offer. The number of students we have is tremendous. So, Dr. Cheung, just simply the fact that you were there and responsive and willing to come is what started that. As far as being able to know which R1 programs are willing to take the students. what we try to do is, and part of the purpose for the seminars is to give the students the opportunity to learn about different research projects that different researchers are involved in, and then we try to work with the researcher to find out what their needs are, what kind of student they're interested in, and then we work to find that student, try to get some feedback, some back and forth, to make sure it's a good fit and to make sure the student understands what the requirements are for the program and that they're available. And the biggest thing I think is honestly just, it's got to be something that all parties are comfortable with and are good with moving forward.
Just a fast comment here. I think basically you guys just keep impressing me more and more. You're doing a spectacular job. And from the part of DVP, Margaret can say that, but I will say that we want to support this program as much as we can. Basically, if you have good ideas, if we don't have the funds, we're going to look for it. And I think something really, really important for everybody, particularly for the students. That's what we really want to help the most, but also for the faculty. Okay, so count on us and let's keep the good work. And like I said, these programs are great because I just cheerleader it and you guys do all the work, but it has been fantastic.
So I have to say that Jeff and also Bart did a fantastic job helping us to field the students who will best match the program. I think this is where the magic is.
Exactly.
Because each year, the HCC, we received like 1 or 2 fellows from the HCC, and they all did fantastically well and well prepared. And I have no idea how you and Jeff actually are able to do that. We were basically providing all this mentoring, but how do you actually went through the selection process? I think there's a secret sauce you have to share with us.
Well, like I said, I think the most important thing is that they're captivated by what they saw. When I mean, and just for talking about Muhammad for a second, just as a quick example, he just lit up when he saw y'all's presentation, and what I've learned from talking with not just yourself, but now over a dozen different researchers and getting a better feel for kind of what they're looking for and being able to tell the students, you know, this is what you're getting involved in. We all know the power of research to be able to transform these students' outlook on education, on themselves, probably even more importantly. Just like that one little video clip we showed that one student is like, you know, I couldn't believe I did that. And that's the biggest thing, is just exposing them to that. So you guys are very receptive and open to whoever we send, but you know, we feel like there is some communication, some interaction that facilitates that. But y'all's willingness to just open up your arms and open up your hearts and your programs to these students is a big part of that. I mean, I think that's probably the magic of what you guys do with them once they get into your programs, and how the kind of experience you give them, and the patience you show with them. That's a huge part of it as well.
I think some of the secret sauce too is that they self-select, right? Like we give them a huge variety of options and they're pursuing their own interest within those options. And so they have a really strong sense of agency in that process. And in my opinion, that's probably really key to why you're getting such awesome, amazing students.
Thank you so much for the great work. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Marta.
Thank you, Jose, too, for trusting us.
Yeah, and I think we have, I think we're scheduled for a 5-minute break, but we do have one other question in the chat here. And it's Drs. Nagy and Stear, are your self-paced virtual materials related to building a mindset and skill set accessible online, or do they require being part of your program?
At this point, those curriculum materials are part of our program. So they were largely developed by Jordan Carswell at the West Houston Institute for the Ideas Academy, which is a co-curricular program that they run out of the Idea Studio there. The Idea Studio is the maker space And so those belong to Jordan for the most part now. He's been generous in letting us kind of take them, mold them a little bit, and apply them for our students. So they're housed in Canvas. We use it for LSAMP. We use Jordan uses the same curriculum for some dual credit student co-curricular projects. And so right now they're sort of unique to those Canvas courses. Jordan and I were talking the other day about the fact that they're awesome, and there definitely would be some benefit to disseminating them more broadly. It's not clear how we might do that. That's a very long-term, kind of larger scale thing. So yeah, right now they're housed in the courses in Canvas. So yeah, definitely they're not available for everyone.
Well, it's great that it is available though. So really great. Let's thank Ms. Stear and Ms. Nagy again, everybody. All right, and then so we're going to go ahead and skip the break to move things along and stay on track here. So for our final talk, the title is Lessons Learned at an HBCU, the Fisk-Vanderbilt Master's to PhD Bridge Program, and Other Insights Gained Along the Way. And the presenter is Lee E. Limbird, and she obtained her undergraduate degree in chemistry from the College of Mercer, Ohio in 1970, where she was mentored by Theodore Roosevelt Williams, then the sole African-American faculty member in STEM. She earned her PhD in biochemistry from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 1973. And after completing a postdoctoral fellowship with Dr. Robert J. Lefkowitz at Duke University, she established her own lab at Vanderbilt University from 1979 to 2014. Her laboratory was recognized by multiple awards over the years for purification, cloning, and identification of interacting partners for the epinephrine binding alpha adrenergic receptor, the molecular basis for receptor trafficking to distinct compartments in polarized cells, and functional consequences in vitro and in vivo of mutation of the receptor to selectively disrupt receptor coupling to one versus another cellular signaling pathway. As chair of pharmacology at Vanderbilt, Dr. Limbird enjoyed the privilege of mentoring junior faculty in their career development. As the first associate vice chancellor for research at Vanderbilt Medical Center, Dr. Limbird fostered a focus on interdisciplinary collaboration and discovery acceleration via establishment of critical core facilities for biomedical research. After retiring from Vanderbilt in 2004, Dr. Limbird pursued in more depth her commitment to developing greater opportunities for those currently underrepresented in discovery and in scientific leadership via her roles first at Meharry Medical College, where she served as vice president for research and chair of biomedical sciences, and now at Fisk University, where she has served as dean and continues as professor of chemistry and of biochemistry and molecular biology. So let's now hear from Dr. Limbird.
Hello, my name's Lee Limbird, and it's a pleasure to be with you today on behalf of the Fisk-Vanderbilt Master's to PhD program and to share with you some lessons reciprocally learned from trainees to faculty, faculty to trainees. Before I talk about the details of this program, though, I want to share with you some personal background because it gives you context to help you understand some of the advice I will share. Earlier in my career, I spent 25 years on the faculty at Vanderbilt School of Medicine, and I was absolutely spoiled as a scientist, as a departmental chair, and later as associate vice chancellor for research. We had a great deal of fun in our laboratory. We celebrated everything. We each had hats that were related to our own projects for lab parties. People kept me calm with chocolate from my emergency kit. And every time a paper was accepted or a grant was funded, we celebrated with a bottle of champagne. And where the corks landed is where we permanently glued them to the ceiling. And in fact, I still have some of these corks today in my Fisk office. So you probably ask yourself, if it was all so much fun, why did I shift gears? And I think the reason is best expressed by Mary Oliver, who, in her poem, The Summer Day, when she uses this phrase, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I think the reality is that I had been asking myself for quite a while how long I'd be aware of all the inequities in our world and act like I didn't have to do anything about it. And so I retired from Vanderbilt, and then I took a pause. And what I learned in my post-retirement pause about me was that I love to learn, I love to share what I learn, and I'm willing to speak out. And it's in that context that for the last 16 years, I've been at historically Black institutions, first Meharry Medical College and more recently Fisk University. But I've had another opportunity for discernment. COVID-19 and a fall sabbatical has given me additional learning time. And one of the books I've read recently is Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And one of the things that he emphasizes that just being non-racist is not enough. In fact, we need to be anti-racist. So we not only have to challenge the idea that some races are intrinsically inferior, but we also have to work and support policy that reduces racial inequity. Well, I think that's reasonably straightforward. But then there was another thought that I found provocative and perhaps a little troubling. And that's the concept of an assimilationist, one who's expressing the racist idea that a racial group is culturally or behaviorally inferior and is supporting cultural behavioral enrichment programs to develop that group. So this is what I'm wary of, that in our efforts in behalf of those underrepresented in science, we're not veering towards assimilation of their diversity. And what I want to share is that this is hard work, and mostly because we, as faculty and program leaders, we are in need of continual learning as much as our trainees who we work with. So we know science requires radical creativity, and fortunately, diversity enhances creativity. Furthermore, we live in a society that is continually diversifying. So if we look at these data from 2010, and I picked them from 10 years ago for a reason, if we look at the people who are 5 years and younger, nearly 50% of the population is non-white, and maybe slightly more, 51% is white. So what does that mean? Well, these folks who were 5 years or 4 years old then are now 14 and 15, and they're thinking about what they want to do after they leave high school. And my concern is, are we going to be able to successfully capture this diverse talent? Because if we're honest with ourselves, the structure of science and science training, all of that's evolved in a white structured society. And we've crafted a white structured bandwidth of what are the desirable traits of a scientist. One of the first things we need to do is diversify our faculty. Data have shown that female and minoritized faculty will help attract and retain female and minoritized students. You might ask yourself, really? Really? So here's the Lee Limbird one data point. I spoke at the UNC Chapel Hill PhD commencement in 2005. And what I noticed when the number of students walked through to be hooded is 14 of those students were students of color getting their PhD. 13 of those 14 students worked with mentors of color, one with a white female mentor. So then we have to ask ourselves, are we developing enough underrepresented PhDs that some of them might wish to turn to academia as scholars and mentors? And I think you know before I show the data that we are not. So given this audience's interest in physical sciences, I show here the data for physical science PhDs from 2016. And though they're only 12% of the total PhDs, all of the PhDs show the same trend where disproportionately white students are obtaining their PhDs. Few Asian, fewer Hispanic, fewer still African Americans. So how can we cultivate the equitable ecosystems for research and PhD training that will attract and retain the students that we need for our discovery. And do this in a way where we keep in mind this dual consciousness, that of equity versus assimilation. So sometimes cartoons help, and you may be familiar with this one. So this is a tree, has sort of a bend, has more apples on one side than another. And you can see there aren't many apples being captured by anyone. Perhaps a little more on those standing at the rich side of the tree than others. Okay, so what if we evenly distribute some tools and assistance, namely equality? Well, we see giving everybody the same size stepladder is valuable to some, a little less valuable to others, and not at all helpful to others. Okay, so what does equity look like? Well, equity customizes the tools and resources that we offer folks to try to reduce the inequality. But you can see here, there's still this issue of uneven distribution of the harvested apples, primarily because this side of the tree has more apples. What people focus on now, in fact, is justice. So instead of focusing on just the individuals in the system, we focus on the system. We shore up the tree so that it's no longer bent to one side. And over time, the sun reaches all sides, it's equitably accessible to all the apples, and the harvest is greater for everybody. And this is the picture I think we want to frame and keep in mind as we develop and continue to enhance our programs. There's another metaphor that's used, and that is of plants. And Veranda Montgomery at Michigan State has emphasized this metaphor because, in fact, she is a plant biologist. When we have a plant that looks like it's beginning to wilt or not do so well, we don't ask ourselves if the plant is underprepared. We instead add water and fertilizer and enrich the environment, sort of like what is being shown here in shoring up this folded over tree. So how do we increase opportunities then and equitable environments so that minoritized trainees will come to science and excel in discovery and become leaders in academia? Well, we've talked about the fact that we want to recruit diverse faculty. We also need to create a culture of trust and a reciprocal learning environment so everybody's continually maturing in their cultural awareness. And sometimes this is hard because PWIs tend to think that their environment is the one real world, and they're preparing everyone for that one real world. But the reality is that one real world was crafted by principally white people, disproportionately men, and it's not everybody's one real world, particularly in a diverse society. Finally, we need to tailor our training programs so that they meet students where they are and accompany them to their highest aspirations. And that brings us to the Fisk-Vanderbilt Master's to PhD Bridge Program. So here are some photos of some of our wonderful trainees, many of whom have already graduated. Now, most of the people in this picture are with shades of brown and black, and yet you can see the diversity even among them of their personalities and what they want to share with the world. And that's what makes this program so much fun. The program was founded in 2004 by two physicists, Kayvon Stassen at Vanderbilt and Arnold Berger at Fisk. They both understood each other's science, and they both shared a mutual respect for one another. In 2012, the program expanded to include chemistry and biology, and an executive director was added to the leadership, Dina Myers-Stroud, who is herself a molecular geneticist and had been engaged in cardiovascular research. Over time, the leadership has transitioned, and Kelly Bockelman has taken the role of Kayvon Stassen, and Dina Myers-Stroud, though she's still the executive director, is now associated or assisted by an assistant director. And I point this out because there are human capital resources that have to be invested by institutions to make this go. I think to understand this program, it's also valuable to understand the tale of the two universities who are participating in the program. So on the left, we have Fisk University. It's an historically Black college founded in 1866 by a $1 million gift from Queen Elizabeth I, her response to hearing the Jubilee Singers perform for her. Vanderbilt was also founded in 1866 by a $1 million gift from Cornelius Vanderbilt. They've evolved differently though. Fisk University is primarily undergraduate in its focus, has a little less than 1,000 students, only 30 in the master's phase. In contrast, over the same window of time, probably aided by our racialized society, Vanderbilt has grown to 10 schools. The graduate school is only one of them. And there are many more undergraduates, graduate trainees, and postdoctoral trainees at Vanderbilt than at Fisk. But each of these institutions has something rich to offer to one another. Fisk is considered a welcoming and nurturing environment for minoritized individuals, particularly African Americans. And this is often attributed to the second curriculum that goes on at HBCUs, namely the mentoring of minority faculty to guide students to how to navigate our society at present. Vanderbilt also has unique contributions to make to this partnership. It has very rich core facilities in addition to its expansive faculty that are key drivers of discovery. And our trainees have access to these the minute they walk on our campus. So currently, or to date, we've enrolled 153 students in the Fisk-Vanderbilt Bridge program since its origin. 58% have been African Americans, 23% have been Hispanic, 3% other or mixed races, and 16% have been non-minorities. But overall, 95% of the students who've been trained in this program are from underrepresented or otherwise underserved groups. 58% have been female, and 42% male. So there's some parity there. So here's how the program works through the eyes of a student. They enter the master's program at Fisk in biology, chemistry, or physics. Physics is rather broad. It can include physics, astrophysics, or material science. And they, during their 2-year master phase, take courses at both Fisk and at Vanderbilt. These schools are 2 miles apart, which is an asset for some aspects. We might talk later about what are the challenges that also presents. But during these PhD courses that our students take at Vanderbilt, the Vanderbilt faculty then get to know the trainees as young scientists and aren't just assessing their application for the PhD program as something on paper. The master students apply in the fall of their second year to bridge to Vanderbilt or to other PhD granting programs nationally. And in fact, we require them to apply to multiple programs. Why? Because we want to remind them that they are attractive candidates at multiple research-intensive institutions across the country. One of the things to remember when you work with these programs is that sometimes the numbers seem small, but small gains in numbers can have a big impact nationally. So the APS reported that between 2013 and 2017, 24 PhDs were earned by African Americans in astronomy and physics, and half of these came from the Fisk-Vanderbilt graduate program. We really have remarkable outcomes. Since you're a physicist, we'll talk about the physics program. We've awarded 79 masters in physics. 90% of those master's trainees are either making progress to the PhD or have earned the PhD. So to date, we have 30 PhDs in physics astronomy, or materials science. Here's another important fact. This has been achieved without using the metrics of GRE or GPAs to create a threshold above which people have to rise to be accepted. Here's how we do the application review. Like all graduate programs, there's a personal statement, transcript, letters of recommendation. In the personal statement, we're looking for communication skills, the student's motivation for the PhD, and what are their long-term career goals. In the transcript, we're looking at the particular courses they've taken in the past to see if there are any that we need to supplement. And we're looking at the GPA trajectory. How have they advanced over their 4 years in undergraduate school? In the letters of recommendation, we're looking for the work ethic, the persistence, but in particular, the ownership of the research projects that they've done to date. We have a rubric that we use that helps us decide which candidates to interview. When we interview, it's remote. It's via something like Zoom, but we use no camera. We have a standard set of questions and it's a scripted interview. And we're here trying to probe the understanding of the research that these trainees have done to date and some of their non-cognitive attributes like grit and persistence and their actual joy and love of science. We have typically a 10 to 15% acceptance rate, and we have absolutely no shortage of candidates. This program is just rich with mentoring. And here's why. We don't engage in all this mentoring because we think these students need extra help. No, we engage in it with them because as we explain to them, they are future leaders. And we want to mentor them to accelerate their acquisition of leadership and moving forward. There's peer mentoring. Students enter in a cohort and they meet a welcoming committee of master's and PhD trainees. We have postdocs and alumni who are near peer mentors for our trainees. Dina Meyer-Stroud office as executive director is what's known as a safe place. What's said there stays there. Naturally, the directors of graduate studies also care about how well these students do and what supports they might need. And then there's a leadership team and steering committee so that we can respond to the ongoing input from trainees and continually revise the program. And naturally, their research advisor is also committed to mentoring these trainees. One of the things about mentoring, and I'm sure you've already figured this out yourself, is no one person meets all mentoring needs. We also do a lot of community building, and this is where the joy in the system, sort of like the joy I experienced in my research lab, comes to play. The students truly feel a sense of belonging and refer to the Bridge family. Their cohort is solidified when they first enter graduate school because they come a month early and engage in a so-called boot camp. They're in a professional development course together their first 2 semesters in the master's program, so whether they're in biology, chemistry, or physics, they get to know one another. Vanderbilt hosts Monday evening seminars once a month, which are given by minority scientists from around the country or locally. And here the scientists share their research and they share their story as an inspiration for the trainees. The trainees plan their own social activities and build really strong personal relationships with one another. Each August, we have a research celebration day where the trainees give posters or talks and some alumni return. And basically, we just recognize success of our trainees every step of the way. So here are my thoughts. You might put them in the category of recommendations that I think have been very important in underlying the success of the Fisk-Vanderbilt Bridge. First, we engage in a holistic review practice, and I would recommend that. I would also recommend you consider partnering with minority serving institutions if you're not already. This gives you a chance to create your own second curriculum, things you learn from that minority institution and infuse into the primarily white institution. Faculty mentor training is absolutely essential. All of us carry some stereotypes that we need to grow and learn how to manage. And so this is really essential. And finally, students have taught me the importance of listening, to understand that though it's an embarrassment, there is racism in our society, and we need to be proactive and adopt an anti-racism approach. Thank you, and I look forward to having a chance to talk with you further in the discussion section.
All right, excellent presentation. Let's thank Dr. Limbird. And then while questions are being prepared, I'm very curious because it seems like this bridge program in particular does a very good job of kind of helping to transition students into doctorate programs where I've seen a number of similar programs that don't seem to achieve a similar level of success in getting underrepresented minorities into doctorate programs. Do you think that there's a unique aspect of this specific bridge program that allows it to be so successful, Dr. Limbird?
I think one of the things that helps is that the students are taking PhD level courses at Vanderbilt during their master's phase. Excuse me. So that they're actually, I hate this word, but Kayvon Stassen has used it. They're auditioning at Vanderbilt to demonstrate that they can do perfectly well in those courses. And in fact, you know, we have a sense of pride that sometimes they come out on the top of the class. But so I think that, I think it's for students who don't participate in bridge programs, if between their junior and senior year in undergraduate school, they end up doing summer undergraduate research at an institution where they want to apply to the PhD program, they will probably have an easier time getting in just because they've already met the faculty, they've demonstrated who they are, and they're known in the flesh, not just on paper. So I think that helps. I do think, however, so you'd say, okay, fine. So that's great because you're in the same town, you're a few minutes apart, you can bus over, there's separate parking, all that stuff. I think there, though, is somewhat of a downside. So when we experience pushback from some Vanderbilt faculty or other PhD students at Vanderbilt, I think it's a disadvantage of being in the same city, because when you saw the comparison of the two universities, obviously they started out the same year with the same investment of dollars and they're not in the same place. So it tells you there's a perception in Nashville about who Vanderbilt is and who Fisk is. And it's not always flattering to Fisk. So for institutions that might say, well, we don't have an HBCU in our own town, maybe that's a blessing in behalf of the students because there won't be any preconceived notion about any relative advantages or disadvantages of the two institutions. I think some way of having the students experience a PhD environment they want to apply to while they're a master's, not just in a symposium or a workshop, but actually sort of a lived experience there, can be very helpful, not just in assessing the student, but I think it reinforces the student's self-confidence that I could flourish here. This would be good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. And I think that kind of addresses, at least to a degree, one of the questions in the chat that was asking about the importance of proximity to success in the program. I don't know if you want to touch on that anymore or if we can just move on to the next question.
So my mind drifted while I was reading the chat. So can you ask the question?
Yeah, certainly, no problem.
being a very senior person.
Well, you certainly don't appear to be. The question was, how important is the proximity, I'm assuming, between the two schools to success?
I think it has some assets. I think it has some disadvantages.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question then would be from Sandra McGuire. She asks, she says, thank you so much, Dr. Limbird. Given what Dr. Cheung said about GPA and recommendation letters, what's the relative weight of GPA, rec letters, personal statements, and interviews in the selection process that you go through?
Okay, so GPAs don't matter much if there's a progressive increase or stabilization of GPAs. That's not the first thing we look at. The first thing we look at really is the personal statement of the trainees and their, not only their career goals, but to the extent that they've experienced research. You know, they don't think it's an experiment and a Nobel Prize in the same week, that kind of thing. And whether they're somewhat risk tolerant, like working on projects that don't have any precedent, that kind of thing. So I think it starts there. I think the students who do best in the program are the students who have done a lot of experience or had a lot of experience in the lab as undergrads, or we have many students who have been, not many, but some who've been high school teachers in science and then realize they missed the discovery part of science and then come back. So I think the letters of recommendation are important only to the extent that they talk about a student's enthusiasm and love of learning and persistence and resilience and those kinds of things. And they don't all have to be in the letter. It's this composite.
Okay, excellent. So the next question is from Samuel Cho. It says, the motivation presented here seems to be focused on social responsibility. Is there a resource that points to how there is a big return on investment? I know, for example, that computer science education studies that show that there is economic benefit for working in diverse groups. So can you expand on that?
Well, that's interesting. So I think the social responsibility part actually more relates to earlier talks, which is one of those disadvantages of taping your talk before you hear it. And I know everybody experienced the same thing. So I think the reality is, and this is an oblique answer, but so I've never met a Fisk undergraduate, for instance, or a Fisk Bridge student who didn't want to leave this world better than they found it. You cannot keep these students from reaching out to help other people in their classroom, in high school, whatever it is, right? And it's one of the reasons I love being at Fisk. It's fabulous. So the point is, if that's a motivation, and if that motivation isn't articulated as what they can do with this career in science, then there's a disconnect, right? So I think the social justice part is not disconnected from that, but the reality is the systems can let us down. It isn't necessarily the people, the systems can let us down. And the systems that our students have experienced before they get to us at Fisk, whether as undergraduates or students in these bridge programs, have been oppressive and unwelcoming, or not valuing the people, the students and the individuals like they should have. So I think the social justice part is both an attraction for students who engage in STEM, and I think it's also a lesson for those of us who are on faculty that we aren't creating mini-me's. We're trying to create a richer environment, right? I mean, we won't accomplish anything if we have all this skin color diversity, but everyone behaves and brings the same problems to bear in research, right? If we want to solve diverse, really big, important problems, we need people who have totally different perspectives when they start nibbling away at the elephant. So,
Yeah, that's a very excellent point. Very important topic as well. So the next question is from Madeline Galbraith, and she asks, are there any graduate student groups at Vanderbilt that help the master's students feel more welcome, or is there any type of bridge program between the universities at a more social level?
Okay. So, yes, I think one of the things that's really helped, particularly in the biochemistry areas, is that Vanderbilt University has used an NIH-funded program called the IMSD. Some institutions use that at the undergraduate level, like a McNeese Scholars or a MARC program, but at Vanderbilt, it's at the graduate level. And that group of minoritized students who are in the IMSD program do provide a community. And our students are beginning to participate in those programs so that those students have journal clubs once a week in the fall and then data clubs once a week in the spring. And our students are beginning to participate in those in their first year instead of their second year. And that's really useful.
Yeah, I think having those kind of communities is super important for sure. And then we're supposed to be heading on break, but I want to get this last question in because I think it's pretty important. And it's from Sheila Jaswal. She asks, could you share the GRE and GPA ranges of your fantastic set of successful PhDs that might help assuage the fears of traditional grad programs that it is possible for students to succeed in graduate school, even if the metrics of GPA and GRE don't predict it?
Okay, so here's the research. So I'm going to answer your question, but in my order, because I'm a very strong-willed person. So here's the data on GREs. They only predict how well, if they predict anything, they predict how well students will do in their first semester of courses in graduate school. Now, for those people who have earned PhDs, has anyone ever asked you what your GPA was in your first semester of graduate school? No. They have asked you what was the problem you worked on, how you addressed it, what you learned, etc. Right? So, and that was published in Nature by Kayvon Stassen and Susan Strum several years ago. Those data also showed that if you create these thresholds, and they happen to be a norm at the time that paper came out, then there is only one population of students who are actually going to enter graduate programs. And it's not Caucasian, and it's not Hispanic, and it's not African American. So the GRE, and that's why so many universities have dropped this notion of using the GRE, and we use this surrogate thing of engagement of research, not major accomplishments, not highly sophisticated skills, but engagement of research, being able to talk about the problem you were trying to solve and what you learned about yourself by being in research, right? So I would say that it depends on the field. The GREs for the biological sciences are usually a little higher, 3.2, 3.3. Those for the physical sciences can be lower than that. I meant GPAs. And we really, maybe 5 years ago, we would encourage people to take the GRE. This is before universities stopped requiring it, just so we could see how we could mentor students in different areas so they could perform better. But there you go. So, and the GRE scores, when we did look at them in the past, weren't all that good. But, you know, I had a research lab at Vanderbilt for 25 years, and I was at Duke for a decade before that. And I can tell you that my best graduate students were not necessarily the A students, because they didn't have enough tolerance for risk. They were, you know, so I never bought, maybe that's because I wasn't one of them either, but I think I never bought into that. I bought more into learning and the joy of learning. And I think if we make a mistake in general is that we emphasize with trainees just as early as applying through the whole process, we emphasize how hard it is. And you know what? Yes, and it's fun. And when you have your own research lab, you're like CEO of your own little cottage industry. And you're not even very old yet, right? When you get bored in one area, you change directions. And all you need to do is get more grant money. It's like, who gets a job that's this much fun? And I just think sometimes we fail to share that with students, and then we're not as seductive in attracting them to stay in academia. But that's just a personal opinion.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. Let's thank Dr. Limbird once more for her excellent discussion.
Thank you.